writers intrinsically are always seeking, even as they speak, the right word to use.
Why screenwriting?
That's a great question to start with. I think it's just basically two things, and one is when I was young, the thing that came before I wanted to tell stories, which I think is very integral to wanting to write screenplays, is a love for movies and a love for cinema. And so I think I just became like a movie addict first, without any sort of concern whatsoever for the idea of writing a screenplay. Just kind of getting a rush from movies and watching movies and talking about movies and wanting to introduce my friends to movies. So for me, I think that was the first, the amuse-bouche on the palette before I launched into storytelling. Storytelling was something else. Storytelling was the idea that there was a message that I wanted to convey, a statement that I wanted to say. And usually, and that didn't really sort of progress until for me, I was in my early 20s. And I had these ideas, and I would see these great films from people that were expressing, at the time for me, these kind of subjects that dealt with things that hit me in the heart and at my core, for who I was as a young adult, as a young black male adult. And one example, of course, would be, two examples would be John Singleton and Spike Lee. And I thought, hey, I want to tell stories that have like messages that are akin to that have that kind of, that relate to, to people like me. So that was the impetus. And then I went on a journey of trying to discover how to do that. And that entailed mining what I love about the written word, and that also involves, a love of literature, a love of storytelling of all types. I think that screenplays are usually just elaborate short stories, just unspooled in a slow fashion, across 12 beats, which would make it 3 acts. But yeah, I hope that wasn't too long.
No, it was perfect. You said something about mining the written word. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you expand?
Well, it what I mean by that is that when it comes to writing screenplays specifically, you're telling a story in pictures. And to tell a story in pictures, you have to use these blunt little tools that are called words. And you have to find new and different ways to use those words, juxtapose those words, abuse those words even, to make a picture out of a scene. If you have a scene in which there isn't any sort of banter, if you don't have two characters exchanging dialogue, you have to create what amounts to an interpretation or a blueprint that the director is going to work from, and and on all the other attendant people involved. So that is mining the written word. You have to find the right words to do so. So I mean, so even as I speak right now, you'll find this affects, I think, the DNA of writers and screenwriters, because I think writers intrinsically are always seeking, even as they speak, the right word to use. Because when it comes to writing, you're sitting there, you're being still, you're being patient. If you were born sometime before 1980, you were in front of a blank page. If you were born somewhere after 1990, you're in front of a blank screen, and you're waiting. You're waiting to get just the right word to string next to another word to get right, to be a correct approximation of what you want the director or producer or even the reader to take away from the experience of that scene.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been writing scripts in a scattered fashion for I'll be told about 23 years. And yeah, that's the long and short.
23 years. And so was there a point when you almost walked away from screenwriting?
Absolutely.
Or should I ask which time, or what happened each time?
I'd say a few times early in the game, especially when it seemed really hard. But the thing that kept bringing me back was pretty easy. Is it wouldn't let me go. I think that's a complex thing to answer, because I think if you intrinsically feel called to write, people say that, and it sounds really pretentious. It's like you were called to be a part of the monastery, like you're a Jesuit somewhere. This is not. I know it sounds pretentious, but it does actually exist. And if you survey a number of writers, they will sometimes use that phrase because they find that they can't pull themselves or wrestle themselves away from the computer. That they have to come back and they have to work at something because it's nagging at them, and it won't stop nagging at them until it's finished. And so for me, it was like that. And it was only when after a period of time in which it started to become a little facile, it started to become a little easy, that I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to keep going, So there are other things too. There's little lessons that you learn along the way. There's examples from other writers that you pick up that give you a really strong skill set to use and to borrow from, that make it real simple in my mind. I can expound on that for maybe 2 hours. And I'm actually not kidding. So if we wanted to get into that, but yeah, there's stuff like that.
So you found it got easier for you, and you were okay with the fact that there was something sort of pulling you to do this, that it almost felt like it was beyond your control.
Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah, that's basically what it is. If I wanted to get a little bit more flowery about it, some people, some people believe in a higher power, some people believe in a muse. So I think that with writing, there's always something that is pulling you towards writing it and the story.
And what kind of stories were you pulled toward? I mean, you said there were certain filmmakers, John Singleton, Spike Lee, that you wanted to emulate, that you wanted to make movies similar to theirs.
Yeah. In the beginning, I was very interested in writing stories that were kind of carbon copies of the kind of stories that they were telling. That soon started to evolve. I started becoming interested in telling a little bit more action-oriented, almost elongated, well, not really elongated, but like a sort of cinematic comic book-esque type stories, because I love comic books and I grew up on comic books, and that started to become incorporated into the kind of writing I was doing. And all the while, as I was developing my craft, I was, as usual, seeing more movies, more kinds of movies, different kinds of movies. I'm a big proponent of writing styles that aren't exclusive to what happens in Hollywood or in America. I think that what happens in Europe and Britain, I think the Hong Kong filmmakers and writers are excellent. I think, for example, of course, John Woo, Wong Kar-wai, the European filmmakers, Michael Haneke, Krzysztof Kieslowski, Mike Lee. These are all, they all provide a different set of tools that you can also bring and use. And so along the way, I found myself almost kind of coming full circle back to what I wanted to tell in the first place, or the kind of stories I wanted to tell in the first place, but with a more assured voice, with my voice, as opposed to being more of a carbon copy or a copy,
Michael Clayton?
Interesting. Love that movie. Why I love that movie is a couple reasons. I think that that one of the finest filmmakers and writers in the business is Tony Gilroy. His work is indelible. His screenplays are extraordinary. If you want to talk about terse action, suspense, drama, and any kind of suspense that feels rooted in reality, as opposed to being too cartoonish, that is Tony Gilroy. And if for anyone who doesn't know his attach his name to his films, we're talking The Devil's Advocate. He wrote the first three Bourne movies, and of course the gorgeous and beautiful film Michael Clayton, which is basically about a character, about a man who is, as I was saying a little earlier, is stuck in a sort of nomad's land, because he has this he's burdened by being able to do certain things that that render him antisocial in the world. Yet he's still a very useful figure. He's a commodity, and he's a commodity that is to the detriment of his own well-being in many ways. So love that film. What's really great about that film, though, is what it does and what it blends is that it takes all the excitement that you get, all the boys stuff that you like, if you're a boy, with bad guys and good guys and good triumphing over evil and the gray areas that exist in between, and it marries it with drama that is really, really, I think, socially relevant and gives a message and harkens back to a lot of those 70s films. And those are the films I grew up on and were the films that I became a fan of when I was a kid. Those were films like Sidney Lumet's films, like Dog Day Afternoon or Serpico or any of those. Network, phenomenal film. But yeah.
Right, and where you were talking about the gray area in between, and sometimes where the gangster in the film is not actually the worst character in the end, we find out that it was the one that had the appearance of sort of the straight and narrow, but actually where sort of their morals got, it's interesting. I feel like, I'm not even sure where I'm going with that. I know we were watching something.
Moral ambiguity.
Okay, moral ambiguity.
That's the word.
Okay, thank you. And discovering that in a character, because it's not always it's not always obvious to the audience. And when we find that the one that we suspected was the bad one actually had more of a code of honor or ethics than one that looked squeaky clean and we thought we could trust. So it's those gray areas, and you see
absolutely.
it in the news and in life. Yeah,
absolutely. That's what I enjoy about that kind of work. I think that I personally, and I don't think everyone feels the same way, but I feel that work like that enlightens you about areas of the human condition is edifying, because you grow an insight, and then you have the potential to take that insight, whether it is creatively or otherwise, you take it and you can potentially evolve yourself. So that's